Why was she invisible to them? The armory smelled like every military space she'd ever known. Ozone, lubricant, the faint metallic tang of weapons-grade steel, sterile, orderly, a place where everything had its designated slot, its perfect geometric position on the rack. And there she was, a smudge of something older, something that didn't fit the pristine Navy aesthetic. Gunnery Sergeant Ava Rostova's hands moved across the carbon fiber case of her rifle. The surface told stories the young Marines around her couldn't read. Silvered edges where black had worn away. Scars that mapped a decade of missions they'd only heard about in training simulations. The rifle itself, a Nemesis Mark IV, was a custom piece. Brutalist lines, nothing sleek or ergonomic about it. It looked like what it was, a tool built for a single purpose. Corporal Marcus Thorne leaned against a rack of shock batons, arms crossed. Confidence radiated from him like heat from a reactor core. Look what the inter-service transfer dragged in. His voice carried across the polished deck, loud enough to make sure everyone heard. His companions, younger Marines with faces still soft from the academy, snickered on cue. That a rifle, Gunny, or a relic you dug up from the Martian boneyards? She didn't look up. Her focus remained on the bolt assembly. Her hands, scarred but steady, moved with an economy of motion that was almost hypnotic, mechanical. She slid the bolt into the receiver. The sound it made wasn't the harsh click of standard-issue hardware. It was deeper, a hydraulic thump, like a vault door closing. The sound of perfectly machined, hand-lapped steel meeting its housing, a sound of finality. Heard she was an instructor back on Titan for the last decade, the second Marine whispered. Private Jiao. His voice dripped with dismissal, probably teaching cadets how to salute. Thorne pushed off the rack, sauntering closer. He was young, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who'd only ever known success in simulations. Everything about him screamed unearned confidence. An instructor, he scoffed. They send us a teacher for a live-fire extermination. What's she going to do? Lecture the target to death? Rostova picked up her scope, as long as a man's forearm, a heavy cylinder of optics and sensors that bore no manufacturer's mark. She began calibrating it, her eye pressed to the rubberized cup. The data overlay flickered to life. Windage, Coriolis' effect for the station's artificial gravity, a dozen other variables she dismissed with a blink. She was looking at the grain of the far wall, the microscopic stress fractures in the bulkhead, seeing the world in a way they couldn't comprehend. Hey, I'm talking to you, Gunny. Thorne stood directly over her workbench now. He gestured at her rifle with theatrical disgust. Seriously, what's the range on that thing? You planning on shooting our target from here? She finally looked up. Her eyes were the color of a winter sky, pale, cold, etched with fine lines at the corners. They held no anger, no annoyance. They held nothing but a profound, weary stillness. She looked at Thorne, then through him, as if he were just another environmental factor to be calculated and dismissed. It's adequate, she said. Her voice was low, with a faint, unplaceable accent buried under years of military monotone. The simple, non-confrontational reply seemed to infuriate Thorne more than any insult could have. He saw it as weakness. The timidity of a woman past her prime, out of her depth. He sneered. Adequate, right. Well, you keep playing with your museum piece, Grandma. Try not to strain yourself. The real work is for us. He turned and walked away, his cronies following like pilot fish. Rostova watched them go, her expression unchanged. Then she returned to her work. She loaded a single heavy-caliber tungsten round into the breech, her thumb pressing it down until it seated with another quiet, perfect thump. She did not load the magazine. One round was enough, for now. The armory door hissed open. A young tech specialist entered, Sergeant Kaido Tanaka. He gave Rostova a wide berth, his eyes flicking nervously from her scarred rifle to the smirking Marines across the room. He saw the friction, the dismissal, and wanted no part of it. He hurried to his console and pretended to be busy. Rostova paid him no mind. Her world had shrunk to the cold steel beneath her hands and the silent, patient weight of the bullet in the chamber. The mockery was just noise, like wind, and she had learned long ago how to use the wind. But there was something they hadn't seen yet, something hidden beneath her partially unzipped tactical vest. A small circular patch sewn with neat, tight stitches onto the dark gray inner lining. It depicted a stylized white raven, its wings spread on a field of pure black. She adjusted her vest slightly, covering it. Not out of shame, out of habit. Some things were meant to stay hidden until the moment they mattered. What could make an admiral's face turn to stone? The briefing room was a hemisphere of holographic light. At its center, a three-dimensional model of the target spun slowly. A sprawling refinery complex on the barren moon of Tartarus, all harsh angles and industrial brutality. Admiral Vance stood before it, ramrod straight in his crisp black Navy duty uniform. His face was sharp, angular. His eyes held the cold certitude of a man who had never had an order questioned. "The target is Kaelin," Vance began, his voice clipping through the silence like shears through wire. "A former Alliance warlord turned pirate king. He's repurposed this decommissioned helium-3 refinery into a fortress." Red threat indicators pulsed across the hologram like a heartbeat. "The facility is protected by military-grade energy shields, active counter-electronic warfare suites, and a battalion of well-armed mercenaries." He paused for effect. "Orbital bombardment is not an option. A frontal assault would be suicidal." He gestured and the hologram zoomed in. Maintenance tunnels, exhaust vents, the hidden veins of the complex. "Therefore, our approach will be surgical. SEAL Team Gamma, led by Lieutenant Commander Phillips, will perform a high-altitude, low-opening insertion here." A green arrow appeared. "And infiltrate through this primary coolant conduit. Simultaneously, our cyber warfare unit will launch a coordinated attack to create a momentary flicker in their shield grid, giving Gamma the window they need." It was a clean plan, elegant, technological, a plan conceived in a sterile command center for a war to be fought by proxy, by drones and algorithms. The Marines, including Thorne, nodded in appreciation. It was their language. "Once inside," Vance continued, "Gamma will proceed to the command hub and neutralize Kaelin. Mission is capture or kill. Preference is kill. We want this cancer excised." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "To support Gamma's exfiltration, we will require overwatch. A sniper position will be established on this ridge." He indicated a jagged line of rocks overlooking the refinery, over a kilometer away. It was an afterthought, a minor detail in his grand technological symphony. "Who is our designated marksman for this operation?" Rostova stood. "Gunnery Sergeant Rostova, sir." Vance's eyes settled on her. He scanned her from head to toe. Surprise flickered across his features, then disapproval. He noted the age in her face, the lack of polished deference in her posture. His gaze fell to her tactical vest, partially unzipped against the stuffy heat of the briefing room. And there it was. The patch, the white raven on its field of pure black. Vance's face, already stern, hardened into a mask of cold fury. He took 2 steps toward her. His voice dropped to a dangerous hiss. "What is that patch, Gunnery Sergeant?" The room went dead silent. Every eye was on Rostova. She didn't flinch under his glare. "It's an Okhotsk raven, sir." The name meant nothing to the junior personnel, but a few of the older officers shifted uncomfortably. Vance's eyes narrowed. The 7th Special Reconnaissance Group was decommissioned 2 decades ago. Its records were sealed, its existence officially denied. That insignia is forbidden on any uniform, in any context, active or reserve. It represents a history the Alliance has chosen to forget. He pointed a rigid finger at her chest. "That badge is banned in my command. Remove it." Rostova's gaze met his. For a moment, a flicker of something ancient and defiant sparked in their depths, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same weary stillness. Yes, sir. She reached up slowly and zipped her vest all the way to her throat. The white raven disappeared beneath the dark fabric, but she did not remove it. She covered it, a subtle act of compliance that was also quiet defiance. The patch was still there, still against her heart, just hidden from his sight. Vance's jaw tightened. He wanted to push, to demand she cut it out right there, but something in her eyes stopped him. A cold, patient certainty that said she had seen far worse than an angry admiral, that his fury was just another form of wind. He turned sharply away. Rostova will take over watch, briefing dismissed. The room emptied in a wave of shuffling boots and whispered conversations. Rostova remained standing for a moment, her hand resting over the hidden patch. Then she turned and walked out, alone. Thorne watched her go, shaking his head. "Grandma's lucky she didn't get court-martialed," he muttered to Jiao, "walking around with band insignia like she owns the place." But Sergeant Tanaka, sitting quietly at his terminal, had seen something they hadn't. He'd seen her eyes when the Admiral confronted her, and what he'd seen wasn't fear or shame. It was something far more unsettling. It was the gaze of someone who had already survived the worst thing that could happen to her, and everything after that was just noise. Why was the ridge so quiet? The moon of Tartarus was a dead place, a wasteland of rust-red dust and jagged volcanic rock, no atmosphere to speak of, just the thin, poisonous whisper of sulfur dioxide that clung to the ground like a toxic fog. Rostova lay prone on a ridge overlooking the refinery, her body a perfect horizontal line. She had been in position for 3 hours, motionless. Her pulse had slowed to 40 beats per minute, her breathing shallow and controlled. She was not waiting. She was becoming part of the landscape. Her rifle rested on a small bipod, its barrel extending over the lip of the ridge. Through her scope, the refinery complex filled her field of vision, a sprawling industrial nightmare of rusted gantries, coolant towers, and armored bunkers, Kalen's fortress. From this distance, over 1,400 meters, the individual guards looked like insects, small, fragile, unaware. Her earpiece crackled. "Overwatch, this is Gamma Actual. We are go for insertion in 30 seconds. She didn't respond, she didn't need to. Her role was simple: watch, wait, kill anything that threatened the mission. The SEAL team's voice faded into tactical silence. She watched the refinery through her scope. The guards moved in predictable patterns, lazy, overconfident. They believed the energy shields made them invulnerable. They were wrong. Then the unexpected. A figure emerged from a maintenance hatch on the far side of the complex. Not a guard, something else. He wore no armor, just civilian clothes, but he carried himself differently, deliberately. He walked to a raised platform overlooking the main courtyard and pulled out a handheld scanner, scanning the perimeter, looking for exactly the kind of infiltration Gamma was attempting. Rostova's finger rested lightly on the trigger. Her breath slowed further. She calculated windage, gravity drop, the slight curvature of the shot. 1,400 meters was not an impossible distance. It was just unforgiving. At this range, the bullet would take nearly 2 full seconds to reach its target, 2 seconds for the wind to push it off course, 2 seconds for the target to move, 2 seconds to account for a dozen variables the younger snipers wouldn't even think to measure. But something stopped her from firing. The man with the scanner wasn't acting like a threat. He was acting like he was looking for something specific. A frequency. A signal. He was hunting for the cyber warfare team's attack vector. If he found it, Gamma would be walking into a trap. Her earpiece crackled again. "Overwatch, Gamma is inside the conduit, moving to phase 2. The man with the scanner stopped, tilted his head. He'd found something. Rostova made her decision. She exhaled half a breath. The world narrowed to a single point. The reticle settled on the man's center mass. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked back into her shoulder with the force of a small explosion. The sound was muted by her suppressor, reduced to a deep, reverberating thump that echoed across the barren ridge. She didn't watch the bullet's flight. She was already cycling the bolt, ejecting the spent casing, and loading another round. Muscle memory refined over 10,000 repetitions. Through her scope, the man with the scanner stumbled, clutched his chest, fell backward off the platform. Alarms began to wail. And that's when everything went wrong. What happens when silence becomes war? The refinery exploded into chaos. Floodlights ignited across the complex, turning night into harsh, artificial day. Guards poured out of barracks like disturbed ants. Rostova's scope tracked their movements with mechanical precision. She could hear Gamma's voice in her earpiece, tense but controlled. "Overwatch, we are compromised. Enemy is mobilizing. We need cover. Now." She didn't respond. Her world had contracted to a 6-inch circle of magnified reality. A guard appeared in a watchtower, swinging a heavy machine gun toward the maintenance tunnels where Gamma was operating. She adjusted her aim. 2 degrees left, squeezed. The rifle bucked. The guard's head snapped back and he collapsed out of view. Another target. A squad leader barking orders into a radio, organizing a sweep. She led him by half a meter, accounting for his movement. Fired. He dropped. Reload, breathe, acquire. An enemy sniper was setting up on a rooftop 300 meters from Gamma's position. Elevated, good cover. He was scanning with his own scope, looking for her, looking for the ghost who was dismantling his defenses. She placed the reticle on the dark shadow of his head, barely visible behind his scope. It was a difficult shot. He was partially concealed, but she had no choice. She fired. The enemy sniper jerked and slumped forward. Her hands moved without thought now. Eject, load, settle, fire. Each shot was a surgery, precise, necessary. She wasn't thinking about the men she was killing. She couldn't afford to. They were variables, threats to be neutralized. If she thought of them as people with families and dreams and fears, she would hesitate. And hesitation at 1,400 meters meant her team died. A communications array. She put 2 rounds into its base, collapsing it. A heavy weapons emplacement being wheeled into position. She targeted the gunner, then the loader. An infantry squad trying to flank Gamma's exit route. She took them one by one, from back to front, so they wouldn't know where the fire was coming from until it was too late. Gamma's voice crackled in her ear, breathless. "Overwatch, you are a goddamn artist. Kalen is down. We are exfiltrating now. Keep them off us." 14 confirmed kills in under 6 minutes. Her rifle was hot, the barrel beginning to glow faintly in the darkness. She should stop, let it cool, but Gamma was still in danger. She kept firing. And then through her scope she saw him. A man stepping out onto the main balcony of the command tower. Tall, gray-haired, wearing an expensive tactical vest that looked more ceremonial than functional. He held a pistol loosely in one hand. He wasn't running, wasn't taking cover. He was staring directly at the ridge, directly at her. Kalen. But he should have been dead. Gamma had just reported him as neutralized, unless. Her mind raced. A body double. Kalen had used a decoy. The real warlord had been watching from safety the entire time. He raised his pistol, not at her, at something behind him. A figure being dragged forward by 2 guards, a SEAL, one of Gamma's men, captured. Kalen pressed the pistol to the SEAL's head. It was a message, a challenge. He knew she was out there, and he was daring her to try the shot. Rostova's breath caught. 1,400 meters, wind gusting unpredictably, a hostage situation. The margin for error was measured in millimeters. If she missed, the SEAL died. If she hesitated, the SEAL died. There was no good option. Her finger rested on the trigger. The reticle centered on Kalen's head. But the SEAL's head was inches away, overlapping. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, breathed, opened them, adjusted, not for Kalen's head, for his shoulder. The one holding the pistol, it was a larger target, easier to hit. If she severed his arm, he'd drop the weapon. She fired. The bullet covered the distance in what felt like an eternity. She watched through the scope as Kalen's shoulder exploded in a spray of red. The pistol fell from his nerveless fingers. He staggered back, screaming. The guards released the SEAL and rushed to their leader. The SEAL rolled free, scrambling for cover. Gamma's voice erupted in her ear. "Target is secure. Hostile leader is down. Overwatch, you just saved his life." She didn't respond. She was already packing her rifle. The mission was over, and she had one more thing to do before she left this ridge. She reached into her vest and pulled out the small circular patch. The white raven. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she pressed it against her heart, hidden beneath the fabric. But there. Always there. Why does silence feel heavier after the storm? The station's debriefing room was colder than the ridge had been. Rostova sat alone at a long metal table, waiting. She had cleaned the dust of Tartarus from her rifle, broken it down, and stored it in its case. Her hands still smelled faintly of gun oil and cordite. She didn't mind. It was a familiar smell, a smell of completion. The door hissed open. Admiral Vance entered, followed by Lieutenant Commander Phillips and several senior officers. They carried data pads displaying mission analytics, kill counts, trajectories, time stamps, the cold mathematics of warfare. Vance's face was unreadable. He sat down across from her without a word. The other officers remained standing, forming a silent tribunal. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Phillips broke the silence. 14 confirmed hostile kills, 3 heavy weapon emplacements neutralized, 1 enemy sniper eliminated, 1 communications jammer destroyed, 1 infantry squad wiped out, and 1 high-value target critically wounded and captured. He looked up from his data pad. All from a single Overwatch position, all in under 12 minutes. Vance's eyes were fixed on Rostova. She met his gaze without blinking, without pride, without apology. "You disobeyed a direct order," Vance said quietly. She tilted her head slightly. "Sir, I ordered you to remove that patch." Her hand moved to her vest, still zipped, still concealing the white raven. "I covered it, sir, as ordered." Vance's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to reassert his authority. But the numbers on the data pad told a story he couldn't refute. She had saved the mission, saved lives, and she had done it with a band insignia over her heart. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small file, physical paper, rare in the digital age. He placed it on the table between them. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. She glanced at it. "No, sir." "It's the declassified summary of Operation Okhotsk, the 7th Special Reconnaissance Group's final mission." He opened the file. 26 operators inserted into hostile territory. Objective: eliminate a rogue AI weapons platform before it could be activated. The mission was considered a suicide run. No extraction was planned. He turned a page. 3 operators survived. You were one of them. The other 2 died from their injuries within a week. He looked at her. You spent 16 days behind enemy lines, alone, wounded, evading capture, and when they finally found you, you were still operational, still mission-ready. Rostova's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. A memory, a ghost. Vance closed the file. The 7th SRG was disbanded because the Alliance didn't want soldiers like you anymore. Too independent, too effective. We wanted teams that followed orders without question, operators who could be controlled. He paused. We were wrong. The room fell silent. Your kill count today, Gunnery Sergeant, brings your confirmed career total to 247. He let that number hang in the air. You are, statistically, the most lethal sniper currently serving in any branch of the Alliance military. He stood, the other officers straightened. That patch, Vance said, his voice different now, represents a legacy we tried to erase. But some things shouldn't be forgotten. Some debts can't be repaid. He looked at her one last time. Effective immediately, you are authorized to wear the Okhotsk Raven insignia, publicly, with full honors. It wasn't an apology. It was something more. It was acknowledgement. Rostova stood slowly. She unzipped her vest. For the first time, the white raven was visible in the cold light of the debriefing room. She didn't smile, didn't thank him. She simply stood there, the patch displayed on her chest like a battle standard. Vance nodded once. Then he turned and left, the other officers following. Phillips remained behind for a moment. He approached her, his face sincere. "My men are alive because of you. Thank you doesn't even begin to cover it." She looked at him. "They're good operators. They would have made it." "Maybe," Phillips said, "but not all of them. You gave them a fighting chance." He extended his hand. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was firm, respectful. When he left, she was alone again. She looked down at the patch, ran her fingers over the white stitching. 23 names. That's how many operators had died on Okhotsk. 23 ravens who never came home. This patch wasn't for the living. It was for them. What does dignity look like when the world finally sees you? Late that night, the station had settled into its quiet rhythm. The hum of life support systems, the distant clang of maintenance crews working the graveyard shift. Rostova was back in the armory, the only place that felt like sanctuary. Her rifle was completely disassembled on the workbench, each of its 100 intricate parts laid out in perfect order on an oilcloth. She worked under a single utility lamp, the rest of the armory lost in shadow. This was her ritual. Cleaning wasn't just about removing the grime of battle, the corrosive red dust of Tartarus. It was about something deeper. It was about polishing the soul of the machine, the steel extension of her own will. Each piece was wiped with a special solvent, inspected under a magnifying lens for microscopic fractures, relubricated with a single drop of synthetic oil. Her hands, which had been unbreakably steady during the chaos of combat, were now gentle, almost tender. This was her only true form of prayer. After an hour of meticulous work, she paused. She reached up and looked at the white raven on her vest, now openly displayed. The Admiral had given his permission, his public acknowledgement, but that was irrelevant. She had never needed anyone's permission. The badge was not for them. It was for the ghost she carried. From a small hidden pocket in her gear, she produced a sewing kit. It contained a spool of silver-white thread, the kind used for repairing vacuum suits, and a fine, sharp needle. She noticed that a few threads on the patch's edge had frayed during her crawl into position on the ridge. With the precision of a surgeon, she began to reinforce the stitching. Her calloused fingers guided the needle in and out of the tough fabric with practiced ease. Each stitch was a memory. Each knot was a promise to the fallen. The armory door slid open with a soft hiss, breaking her concentration. Sergeant Tanaka stood silhouetted in the doorway. He held a steaming ceramic mug in his hands. He hesitated, looking as if he were about to intrude upon a sacred ceremony. Rostova didn't look up from her stitching. "The door's open, Sergeant." Emboldened, Tanaka walked softly across the deck. He approached the workbench and gently placed the mug down on a clear spot, well away from the rifle components. Nutrient broth, its savory steam rising in the cool air. I ran a diagnostic on your scope's power cell while you were in debrief," he mumbled, staring at the mug instead of her. "Noticed it was running cold. Figured you might be cold, too." It was a clumsy excuse, transparent. Rostova finished a final stitch and bit off the thread. She set the needle down and finally looked at the young man. She saw his nervous eyes, his earnest expression. She saw not a soldier but a kid trying to bridge the vast, terrifying gap between them. Slowly she picked up the mug. The ceramic was warm against her palms. She lifted it to her lips and took a slow sip. The broth was hot, salty, nourishing. The warmth spread from her chest out to her tired limbs. It was the first warmth she had felt all day. She lowered the mug and looked directly at Tanaka. She offered him no words of thanks, no smile. Instead, she gave him a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, of acceptance. For Tanaka, it was like the sun breaking through clouds. A connection had been made. He nodded back, profound relief and respect washing over his face. He said nothing more, simply turned and walked out of the armory, leaving her to her quiet ritual. Rostova took another sip of the broth. She looked at her handiwork. The white raven was secure now, its silver-white stitches catching the lamplight. It looked bolder, brighter. She placed the mug down and picked up the rifle's bolt assembly, its surface now gleaming and flawless. Outside the armory's viewport, the cold, distant stars of the void glittered in the endless black. Her work was done for the night, but the vigil, as always, continued. In the mess hall 3 decks above, Corporal Thorne sat with his friends, nursing a cup of coffee. He hadn't said much since the mission debrief, since the numbers had been read aloud. 14 kills, 247 career total. The words echoed in his head like an accusation. Zhao broke the silence. You think she even cares about what we said? Thorne stared into his coffee. No, he said quietly. I don't think she thinks about us at all. And he was right. Down in the armory, Rostova continued her work. Methodical, patient, alone. The mockery of young Marines was just wind, and she had learned long ago that wind could be measured, calculated, and used to guide a bullet across impossible distances. She had learned that respect was not given by admirals or earned in briefing rooms. It was forged in the quiet moments between heartbeats, in the space between breath and trigger pull, in the discipline of showing up, doing the work, and carrying the weight without complaint. The white raven on her chest caught the light one more time as she moved. 23 names, 23 promises kept. She had worn it in silence for 2 decades, not because she needed permission, but because some honors are too heavy to parade. Some victories are too sacred to celebrate. And when the world finally looked at her and saw what had been there all along, she didn't change, didn't preen, didn't demand apologies. She simply continued her work. Because dignity doesn't ask for validation. Dignity doesn't demand to be seen. Dignity doesn't speak in loud voices or flashy displays. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak at all. It simply acts.